Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Crack Pack a Day. Every day, I'm going to open a booster pack of Magic the Gathering cards and evaluate the contents, choosing one of them to take as if I were taking part in a draft, and this was pack 1, pick 1. Today, we're going to be opening a pack of Magic Origins, the final Magic core set. Why don't we open it up and take a look? Our first card is Grasp of the Hieromancer, an enchantment aura for 1 and a white. It enchants a creature which gets +1/+1 and the ability, whenever this creature attacks, tap target creature defending player controls. In my opinion, Grasp of the Hieromancer isn't an especially good card. It suffers all the downsides of auras, namely that if the creature gets removed out from under it, you've just been 2 for 1, and it doesn't give an especially great bonus. +1/+1 isn't that big of a bonus, and whilst the triggered ability is pretty good, especially in an aggressive deck, that doesn't really make this card really worth playing. Overall, I wouldn't be very excited taking Grasp of the Hieromancer as my first pick. Touch of Moonglove is an instant for black. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. Whenever a creature dealt damage by that creature dies this turn, its controller loses 2 life. Touch of Moonglove is a very cheap combat trick, but it suffers from the fact that it doesn't actually help save your creature. It doesn't give any bonus toughness, it doesn't regenerate it doesn't do anything like that. Most of the time, you're going to use Touch of Moonglove and trade one of your creatures for one of your opponent's creatures. You're essentially 2 for 1ing yourself at that point. Whilst I'm sure there are decks that want Touch of Moonglove, it's not especially powerful enough for me to want to consider taking it pack 1, pick 1. Subterranean Scout is a 2/1 Goblin Scout for 1 and a red. When it enters the battlefield, target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. As a 2/1 for 2, Subterranean Scout is an okay card, but it does come with an additional ability. That ability can be pretty useful in allowing you to get creatures past your opponent's defense. An interesting thing to note about the ability is that after it resolves, if the creature that was targeted has its power pumped to greater than 2, it still can attack and can't be blocked this turn, allowing you to get a larger amount of damage than 2 past your opponent's defending creatures. Subterranean Scout is probably best on turn 2, but the ability does give it a little bit of longevity in the long game. It's a reasonably good card, but I don't think I want to take it pack 1, pick 1. A Crowan Jailer, a 1/1 human soldier for white. It has the ability 2 and a white, and tap it to tap target creature. A Crowan Jailer is a bit of a trap. It's a 1/1 for 1, which means that the ability it has to be pretty good to make it worth playing. Unfortunately, the ability to tap a target creature, whilst pretty useful, is kind of expensive here. You're paying 3 mana for the privilege. With that high price, the ability doesn't make it worth putting a Crowan Jailer in your deck. A Crowan Jailer isn't going to be my pack 1, pick 1, and to be honest, I probably wouldn't want to take it at all. Yeva's Force Mage, a 2/2 Elf Shaman for 2 and a green. When it enters the battlefield, target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Yeva's Force Mage is an okay card. As a 2/2 for 3, it's a little small for the mana cost, but the ability isn't too bad. It probably enables you to let one of your creatures that couldn't normally attack through what your opponent has to attack through this turn. That gives it a little bit of utility. The fact that it enables an attack and still leaves a 2/2 body behind afterwards is pretty good. That said, it's still just a 2/2 for 3 at the end of the day, making it not very exciting and almost certainly not the first pick in this pack. Negate, an instant for 1 and a blue. counter target non-creature spell. In Draft, Negate is, at best, a sideboard card. You don't want to main deck it because if your opponent's playing an all-creature deck, it's going to be absolutely useless. The best case scenario for this card is that you see in Game 1 that your opponent is playing at least 5 non-creature spells, and then you bring it in out of the sideboard for Games 2 and 3. As a sideboard card, there's no way I'm taking this as my first pick. Pharika's Disciple is a 2/3 Centaur Warrior for 3 and a green. It has Death Touch and Renown 1. I'm a big fan of Pharika's Disciple. It's a 2/3 for 4, which isn't very exciting. In fact, it's pretty underpowered for that mana cost. But once it gets a hit in, it becomes a 3/4. A 3/4 for 4 is playable. And the Death Touch helps in a number of ways. It almost acts a bit like evasion, because your opponent doesn't really want to block it with anything that would otherwise die, so that helps it get through. On the defensive, the Death Touch means that it'll trade up with anything that it can block. Overall, I think it's a pretty solid card. Pharika's Disciple is probably the best card in the pack so far. Disperse, an instant for 1 and a blue. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Bounce is an essential part of Blue's repertoire, especially in an aggressive tempo-based format like Magic Origins. Whilst Disperse isn't a permanent solution for anything other than tokens, what it does do is buy you time. Also, because it only costs 2 mana, hopefully you can bounce something that costs more than that, and thus you've gained something on your opponent. All in all, Disperse is a pretty good card, and may well be the top pick in this pack. Return Centaur, a 2/4 zombie centaur for 3 and a black. When it enters the battlefield, target player puts the top 4 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Unlike Pharika's Disciple, I'm not a huge fan of this centaur. I don't think you get enough for what you pay. Whilst it does have 1 more toughness, that's not really that good, especially considering that Pharika's Disciple has Renown 1. Magic Origins is a little too aggressive for a 2/4 to be considered especially good in it. If you do put it in your deck, you probably want to target the ability at yourself, assuming that you have other black cards that allow you to bring stuff back from your own graveyard. All in all, Return Centaur isn't going to be my first pick. Ringwarden Owl, a 3/3 bird for 3 blue. It has flying and prowess. Ringwarden Owl is a pretty good card. A 3/3 flyer for 5 is acceptable. It's a big enough body in the air that it's worth playing, and the prowess means that sometimes it'll be a 4/4 for 5, which is close to a bomb in limited. I think Ringwarden Owl is a pretty solid card, and may well be my first pick here. Our first uncommon is Mage Ring Network, a land. You can tap it to add 1 colourless to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 and tap it to put a storage counter on it. Finally, you can tap it and remove X storage counters from it to add X colourless mana to your mana pool. In some formats, Mage Ring Network would be a very good card, enabling you to store your excess mana turn after turn so that you could have an explosive turn later in the game. Unfortunately, Magic Origins is just a little bit too aggressive for that to be a viable option. Rather than wasting 2 lands a turn, 1 to tap for the mana and this to tap to put the storage counter on, you want to be spending your mana every turn. In Magic Origins, Mage Ring Network is just a very bad card. I won't be taking it as my pick here. Clash of Wills, an instant for X and a blue. Counter target spell unless its controller pays X. Again, as a counter spell, Clash of Wills is almost certainly a sideboard card. It's a better pick than Negate in my opinion, because despite the fact that it's technically a soft counter, in that your opponent can pay the mana in order to prevent it from having its effect, most of the time you're going to be putting enough mana into it that your opponent can't pay the cost. Despite being better than Negate, Clash of Wills is still a sideboard card, so it's not going to be my pick here. Foundry of the Consoles, a land. You can tap it to add 1 colourless to your mana pool, or you can pay 5, tap it and sacrifice it to put 2 1/1 colourless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. Unlike Majoring Network, I think Foundry of the Consoles is pretty playable. It's not a great card considering the speed of the format, but as a land that doubles as a spell later in the game, it gives you a little bit of added oomph in your land slots. Being able to give yourself 2 flying creatures can be pretty handy, especially if you've got team pump spells available. It also works especially well if you have a number of instants in your deck, because you can leave your mana open and either use the instants or sacrifice this land in your opponent's end step. Foundry of the Consoles is a pretty fun card and might be my pick in this pack. Our rare is Dwynen, Gilt-Leaf Dayan, a 3/4 legendary elf warrior for 2 green. It has reach, other elf creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever it attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking elf you control. A 3/4 for 4 is a card you're never really going to cut from your deck. If you add reach onto it, that makes it a pretty good card. Then you give the ability to give bonuses to some of your other creatures, it gets a little better, and then every time it attacks, you gain 1 life, because it's an elf, and you might gain more, depending on the rest of your deck. Dwynen is something of a build-around-me card, but has enough of a power level that you don't necessarily have to do so. Even if it's the only elf in your deck, you'd probably be okay with that. It wouldn't be as powerful as it could be if you had an elf deck, but it's still okay. All in all, it's a very good card in the elf deck, it's an alright card outside of the elf deck, and might well be my pick here. We also have a forest and an elf warrior token. Right then, let's have a quick review of what we've got. And here's our pack. To me, the card that stands out the most is Dwynen, Gilt-Leaf Dayan, our rare. A 3/4 for 4 is a reasonably good card, and the 3 abilities that the card has just pushes it over the top, I think. Dwynen Gilt-Leaf Dayan is my pack 1 pick 1 in this pack. And that's about all we've got time for today. If you disagree with my choice, then please let me know in the comments below, on Facebook or on Twitter. Have a good day now.